Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon from wherever you're joining us. Happy Black History Month, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Dr. Kimberly Hassel, and I'm an assistant professor of Japanese Studies and Afro-Asian Studies in the Department of Asian and Middle Eastern Studies at Duke University. I'm also a faculty affiliate of the Asian Pacific Studies Institute, or APSI, which is kindly sponsoring and supporting this event. So it's an honor to be moderating this event, and which is part of the Spring Speaker Series here in APSI. And I'm also so honored to be in conversation with our two distinguished guests, Dr. Felicity Stone-Richards and Mr. Maurice Shelton. So first, I want to thank Dr. Stone-Richards and Mr. Shelton for kindly accepting our invitation and for taking the time to share their insights on the fight against police racial profiling in Japan. I also want to thank APSI for sponsoring this event, and I want to give a special shout out to Renata Kwan and Alexander Nickley for organizing the logistics of this event and for helping with tech support. And finally, I want to thank you all in the audience for taking the time to attend this event and for being in dialogue with us on this important and much needed conversation. So the issues of police racial profiling, police brutality, and police harassment have been covered extensively in contexts such as the United States. However, Japan has not been well represented in this coverage, even though these issues have posed serious obstacles to the everyday lives and well-being of Black and Brown people living in Japan. The Black Lives Matter movement, the Stop Racial Profiling movement, and the growing population of migrants in Japan have all played a pivotal role in bringing the issue of police racial profiling to the attention of local and global audiences. Our speakers today will offer their expertise and knowledge of this ongoing issue in Japan from legal and academic standpoints, and also from lived experience. So first, to introduce both speakers, Dr. Felicity Stone-Richards is a comparative political theorist of Japanese and Black American political thought and activist organizing. Her research focuses on the political claims and organizing strategies of progressive activists in Japan, as well as the history of Japanese intellectuals incorporating Black radical politics into their practice. Dr. Stone-Richards has been the recipient of the Fulbright Research Award and the AAUW Dissertation Fellowship, and she is currently the Postdoctoral Fellow in Japanese Studies at the Center for Japanese Studies at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. She is the author of Toward an Afro-Japanese and Afro-Ainu Feminist Practice, Reading Fujimoto Kazuko and Chikapu Mieko, in Who is the Asianist? The Politics of Representation in Asian Studies. And she is also the author of Black Lives Matter in Japan Too, Japanese Advocates and the Fight Against Police Racial Profiling, which appeared in the August 2025 issue of the Journal of Asian Studies. And I have many of my students in this Zoom event today, and we all read Dr. Stone-Richards' work, and we absolutely love it and appreciate all the work that you're doing and are so excited to be in conversation with you. Introducing our second speaker, Mr. Maurice Shelton is an American performance coach, entrepreneur, and community advocate who has lived in Japan for 11 years. He is the founder and CEO of Get Resolve Inc. and Resolve Fitness and Training Center in Kanagawa, where he leads English-friendly, science-based training programs for Japanese and international clients across the Tokyo metropolitan area. A former professional fighter and combat sports coach, he uses freedom through fitness as a framework for resilience, leadership, and social connection in an increasingly diverse Japan. Maurice is a central plaintiff in a landmark lawsuit against Japan's National Police Agency and local governments, challenging racial profiling in police practices and documenting more than a decade of repeated stops and interrogations while living and working in Japan. His case has been covered by outlets such as ABC News and Kyodo, and he speaks and writes about how everyday policing, race, and migration interact with Japan's demographic crisis and its need to welcome foreign residents. And in class today, my students and I, we all watched several interviews from Mr. Shelton on various news outlets, and we appreciate all that he is doing in this fight. And just to cite the title of an article written by McNeil about making Black history by being Black history. That's truly what's happening here. So in terms of the kind of logistics and the schedule for tonight's event or this morning's event, first, Dr. Stone-Richards will offer her insights, followed by remarks and insights from Maurice Shelton. Then both speakers will then engage in conversation before we open the floor for audience Q&A. So without further ado, please welcome me in, or please join me in welcoming Dr. Stone-Richards.
Thank you so much for that very warm introduction, Dr. Hassel. Um, Hi everyone. My name is Felicity Stone-Richards, and yes, I have studied a great deal on, the BLM movement in Japan and the subsequent Stop Racial Profiling movement that has its roots in the summer of 2020 protests. And so when, the world obviously exploded following the murder of George Floyd, the BLM protests in Japan, initially started with a lot of, commentators talking about the terrible situation in America, how awful police violence is in America. And then you had, a number of BLM chapters pop up in Tokyo, Kanto, and Fukuoka who were really interested in saying, but hang on, we may not be, this place may not be as murderous as America, but Japan is not immune to anti-Black violence. It's not immune to anti-Black police violence. And as in many other countries, the marches that were happening in Japan weren't just solidarity marches in support of Black people in the United States. They were also marches against police corruption and police brutality in their domestic context. And so in this context, you had the BLM movement, and in particular the organization Japan for Black Lives, that was circulating, lots of videos of Japanese police harassing people of color in the Japanese context, i.e., brown-skinned people. So these, one was of a Turkish man who had been shoved to the ground violently, and one was of a Pakistani man whose car was being searched illegally, and one that was particularly influential was of a mixed black Japanese citizen, Alonzo Motegawa, who was having his bag searched by police. And when the police gave the reason for this, the reason was, oh, well, you've got dreadlocks. And, people with dreadlocks, they tend to have drugs. Again, completely spurious, illegal reasoning. But all of these videos together, combined with the global pressure from the Black Lives Matter movement, raised sort of the issue of police racial profiling and brought it to national attention for the first time. And the founder of Japan for Black Lives, Naomi Kawahara, has been, very consistent since 2020 in maintaining pressure on the police and in really spreading the word and spreading the issues of anti-Black discrimination broadly, in addition to the racial profiling with the police. And the Stop Racial Profiling movement has now developed and is really a sort of broad coalitional movement that includes a number of minority rights organization, pro-immigrant organization, human rights organizations, and legal advocacy support groups like the Tokyo Bar Association and Call For, which is the legal advocacy group that has brought forth the case against the police that represents Maurice Shelton and two other people as well. So the demands of this movement, are very straightforward and very clear. They want major reforms for the police. They want there to be mandatory training for police officers on, engaging in stereotypes and the kind of stereotypes that exist. They want the introduction of body cameras, and most importantly, they want the police to be forced to document every time they question and stop and search. Because what has ended up happening is that even though we are aware that there is this systemic issue of the police harassing, non-Japanese looking people, and constantly asking them for their ID, asking them about their jobs, their background, things that they have no business asking them, the police will just, can either say that they had just cause for the questioning or that the questioning didn't happen because they don't keep records of these things. So we want the police to actually have to justify publicly and keep a record of why you're questioning everybody. They want there to be regular surveys on police profiling, and they want concrete guidelines, new concrete guidelines for the police to prevent racial profiling. And a lot of this work has also been supported by the Tokyo Bar Association, which engaged in a very large mass survey of 2,100 people trying to gauge to what extent are, foreigners stopped by the police? And they found in their data a significant statistical difference between people who were racially profiled within the last 5 years. So people who are of Latin American and African heritage were stopped. 83% of respondents said that they had been stopped once or more than once in the past 5 years versus 60% for Europeans and Americans. So you have a 23-point difference between people who are basically from majority brown countries saying that they have been stopped and profiled by the police. But you still have very large numbers of white people, which is to say that, you have this situation where Japanese police are harassing all foreigners, and they're clearly harassing dark-skinned foreigners even more. And so what this has created is sort of this, focus on, okay, we're focusing on the profiling, we're focusing on the illegal questions, and we're focusing now on not only pressuring the police and suing the police, but also in educating the populace on what their rights are vis-a-vis police questioning. And so one of the more recent initiatives from the Stop Racial Profiling movement was to develop, similar to the anti-ICE Know Your Rights card, to develop cards to hand out to people saying, this is what the law is, these are what your rights are. And here is also information on the people who are helping to fight against racial profiling. So they are engaged in a political education campaign. Call 4 was also instrumental in supporting um, sort of a hotline and FAQs and giving people a lot of information on social media in terms of what their rights are. And the rights are actually very clear. You don't actually have to consent to voluntary questioning, with which people are not aware of. They think if the police are questioning me, I have to answer. And so, you're getting the information out there that you don't have to answer. You can choose to walk away. But if they don't let you walk away, now this is something that, we need information on and you need to record. And one of the things that came up in the Tokyo Bar Association survey was that even in the few cases where people did say, I don't want to be questioned, I want this questioning to end, the police ignored them and kept questioning. So you do have this issue where the police are knowingly abusing people's rights. And all of this on its own is already pretty impressive given the fact that before Black Lives Matter in Japan, most people didn't even know that there were Black people in Japan. Most people definitely did not care that the police, would have been harassing immigrants or brown people. And within 6 years, you actually have a very significant movement that is applying real pressure to the police in a meaningful way. And it's doing so at a time when the police is also under additional pressures from all sides. There was a recent case last year where the police in Kanagawa Prefecture entirely dismissed, a stalking event of a woman who was being stalked by her ex-boyfriend. She called the police multiple times. Over 9 months, they did nothing. And the boyfriend eventually killed this woman. And this has, really galvanized a lot of people, who were already critical of the police to say, look at how they entirely mishandled this situation. Dozens of police officers were disciplined during this period. And actually, last year, the disciplines brought against police officers reached a 10-year high. So while the Stop Racial Profiling movement is coming at this from the issue of, a pro-immigrant, pushing against anti-Blackness narrative, there are also additional groups, pro-women's groups, feminist groups, just other, social pressures from people. A lot of people are generally being failed by the police in the Japanese context. And so you have a lot of different groups that are heaping pressure on the police from different sides, which is, you know, good and positive from the sense of if it was just the Stop RP movement, you're fighting an uphill battle, but actually being able to be one of many movements that are calling for real reforms to the police is a good thing because it also means that there is a future for broader coalitional politics, where right now we've got the people who support the non-Japanese coalitional side, but you can also now combine with the feminist and the general social services side as well that has their own issues with the police. Um, and one of the things, but of course, even this movement is not without its problems, and I think there are some things that can be worked on in the future. One of the main issues that I believe needs to be addressed is the way that the Tokyo Bar Association gathered their data. And they gathered their data along the same lines of the Japanese census, which is that they gathered information on people's country of origin. They did not actually gather data on race and ethnicity, which seems like a real faux pas, given that this entire thing was started based on the accusations that the police were engaging in skin color-based racism, that you do not actually have statistics of the race and ethnic background of the people that filled out the questionnaire is a problem. And it's a problem also because it means we don't know within, let's say, the European and American group, well, how many of these people were white, how many of these people were black, how many were Hispanic, because that matters. Because you may find that 60% now is actually a majority non-white group, and maybe the white respondents have fewer instances of stop and search. And we don't know that because you didn't collect that data. So we need that data in order to make a convincing case that this isn't just about police harassing immigrants. This is also about police harassing dark-skinned people. Because one of the issues that does come up when you talk about police harassing people is that, the white people in the room will say, well, I've also been stopped by police. So it's not a race thing, it's a non-Japanese thing. And it's sort of a yes, and like there are layers to this. And in order to show the layers, we need more nuanced data on this. Another issue that we need to tackle is that without giving any allowances to the police because they don't deserve any, the question of the problem with why police harass non-Japanese people is that they are being instructed to, meet certain quotas. And, this goes back to an early 2000s period when the Japanese government wanted to crack down on undocumented immigrants. They don't have that many undocumented immigrants, but, economy was going bad. You needed a scapegoat. And so you're talking about, cracking down on undocumented immigrants who commit crimes. And the only way you're doing that effectively is by just stopping everybody who looks foreign and asking for their papers. And this is a policy that has not been lifted. And the police can legitimately say that they are responding to central government policy that is instructing them in a particular way. Um, and in this climate, obviously, the Japanese government is generally always a center right disposition. It's generally always the LDP who is in charge. But obviously, with Sanae Takaichi, it's very unlikely that, she's taking a hard line on immigration. She's not going to create a less oppressive structure for immigrant workers. So we do have to, at some point, the strategy needs to also encompass you need changes to Tokyo policy that demanded a certain level of, deportation quotas. And for as long as these kinds of policies are in place, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to change much in police behavior because at the end of the day, they're more worried about, their leadership is more worried about getting fired or demoted if they don't meet their quotas more than they're worried about being embarrassed by the general public. And so this is just, one of the things that I think needs to be considered as the movement evolves. But it's not a definite that there can be no reforms. I think there can be reforms, but it's just that I think that we're gonna hit a wall at some point, if there is no reform to sort of domestic immigration policy, because that's ultimately what is driving this police behavior. Um, Additionally, you do have, there is the concern among some that as you are dealing with the labor shortage and you're dealing with the labor shortage within the police as well, that you don't actually have the infrastructure necessary to produce the kind of oversight you need. Um, and this, there are so many layers to this that it gets very complicated, but I think like this is one of the things where any approach to the kind of structural racism that we're dealing with has to be a multi-pronged approach. So police misbehavior, police acting like, little fascists in their, power trip when they get to harass an immigrant, you can deal with that and you can try and introduce some trainings. And I think for some who genuinely maybe are ignorant of, they genuinely think that they're not doing anything wrong, maybe you can change some of these people. Um, but ultimately, you're dealing with an institution that by design is doing what it's supposed to be doing. And so you are going to have to face the reality at some point that it's like, okay, if this is by design doing what it's supposed to be doing, who is the authority over the police? And if the central government is generally going to be useless and going to be a barrier, then we want, local prefectural governmental reforms. So it's not just a police question, but it's, you need the prefectural governors to institute new laws governing what the police are able to do, if the central government is going to be helpful. But in general, this has been a very, you know, interesting and surprisingly well-sustained movement, despite the small amount of people that have, relatively small amount of people that have actually been involved in the day-to-day work of making sure that the pressure is kept up. I think it's a very impressive movement, and I'm relieved and I'm also really gladdened to see that not only has the Black Lives Matter movement spread to Japan in a way that has had meaningful impact, but it's spread to Japan in a way that's had meaningful impact beyond Black people. And I actually think that this is a wonderful example of the potential of Black liberation politics in that it's never just been about Black people. It's just been about showing that when you are in a white supremacist system, and in this case, a Japanese supremacist system, that when you focus on one of the groups that is the most oppressed, it necessarily lifts the bar for everyone else. And so here you have a situation where the focus on police harassment of Black people has then spread to police harassment of brown people, which now gets you to actually, the police generally are trash, but if we can reform this, this is of a boon to every immigrant. This is of a boon to every mixed Japanese person. And I think it's really extraordinary that the Black Lives Matter movement has been able to bring this to Japan. And thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Stone-Richards, for that really helpful context. And I especially love what you mentioned about the potential of Black liberation politics. I completely agree that there is so much potential there. And especially in this moment of Japan's growing multiculturalism, it's really important that these conversations happen. So thank you all so much. And if you are just joining us, please check out Dr. Stone-Richards' article, wonderful article, Black Lives Matter in Japan Too, which tackles a lot of the topics that she just outlined for us, that very helpful context. So thank you so much, Dr. Stone-Richards. So now we will turn the floor over to our other speaker, Mr. Maurice Shelton, who, for those of you who are just joining, Maurice is a central plaintiff in a landmark lawsuit against Japan's National Police Agency and local governments challenging racial profiling in the Japanese police. So, welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, it sounds good that you almost introduced me as a doctor, but in another life. Yeah. So I want to thank everybody for spending time with us today. And before I start, I wanted to dedicate all of the words and all of the energy I can put out today to Chris Payne. Some of you all might be familiar with him. And also, great shout out to Carter G. Woodson and my OG in the crowd right now. He knows who he is, Dr. Russell. We got Black History. Uh, embodied right here in the room. So yeah, so thank you, Felicity, for your words. It just brought up a lot of stuff that I'm currently dealing with right now. It's funny because yesterday I just had a talk with some possible collaborators on a anti-blackness workshop here in Japan. And while I was actually starting that talk, I got stopped by the police. um, and so, like many people, we can go back and forth about the utility of police in a society such as Japan, um, and what uses they have for enabling um, oppressive policies like arbitrary stops, racial profiling, all that. But for me, being on the ground and actually knowing a lot of the people, and we share some of the same circles, me and Felicity, the people that she researched, just knowing that there are people out there that have the right mindset and they have hope. I think that's an essential part of all of this stuff that we're talking about is that, yeah, the world is, it looks like it's falling apart, but we still have to fight. We still have to struggle because just because we're at this level right now with, especially within the American Empire, doesn't mean that it has to stay that way. One of the reasons why I dedicate these words that I'm saying right now and all the stuff that I'm doing to people like Chris Payne, who's unjustly incarcerated right now, is the fact that most people um, are conditioned to believe in anti-blackness. Like it's a matter of fact in this world. Once you're aware of it, I think it is your responsibility in each person, no matter where you are in the world, to try to combat it because what Felicity said is, in my experience, very true. Coming from the Black radical tradition and struggling in Black liberation circles, what's good for the goose is great for the gander. So if you actually are concerned with the liberation and the freedom of movement for Black people of the diaspora, and that means you're actually concerned about the human condition. And if you genuinely believe that we should have equity, we should have mutual dignity and respect for fellow human beings, why would you be against a phrase like, for example, Black Lives Matter? Now, I have my criticisms for the Black Lives Matter movement overall. For example, many people on the left would say, well, there had to be concrete demands. And I agree. Most times in activist circles, and we talked about this before we started recording, we can go on and talk about what we should be doing and why it shouldn't be the way that it is now. But what are the solutions? I started my company, Resolve, approximately 4 years ago because I got tired. I got sick and tired, to quote Fannie Lou Hamer. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Um, freedom through fitness is not just um, being in shape. I'm not ableist. I try not to be. I'm a disability advocate as well. But it's also um, it is a call to action. Um, it's a call to action for anybody that says that they believe in um, DEI, for example, which some people would say is it could be a counter-revolutionary kind of ideal in certain spaces. But if you use it correctly, um, believing in diversity where we are non-hierarchical, we are pushing against, all of the things that oppress us in the institutions that we hold up as the standard or norm. Um, Believing in equity, believing that even someone like a small child has an equal say in how our society is formed and proceeds, believing and including everybody. And that means also giving an audience to the people that might run counter to you. So for me, being somewhat of an organizer and trying to get people to understand my perspective, and then also being in the entertainment world and in the fitness world, I run up against people that maybe deep down in their hearts, they really don't like me, because I am Black. but I still have to figure out how to work with them, how to coexist with them. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to willingly expose myself to abuse or mistreatment, but I do have to be practical. I do have to be pragmatic in achieving my goals, which for me, because I'm a father of five, I'm the only non-Japanese person in my household. Um, what type of future do I envision for my children, especially the ones that look like me and they're walking around as Black people with Japanese nationality? Do I just sit back and say, well, things will work out themselves, or do I take an active role in trying to change my reality? And that's what Resolve is about, to give myself a shameless plug. But also, when I encounter people in leftist circles, especially, making sure that they are not just talking, but you have to actually put some praxis into that, into the mix. So one of the things I always focus on, especially when I have to go into the belly of the beast, or go up into the maw of the ivory tower, burnout prevention, being able to communicate with people on a basic level, layman's terms, just being able to cut out all the jargon and really figure out how do we move together, how do we move forward, how do we go about things in a positive way that is proactive, that is productive. Um, that's usually how I try to operate anything that I do professionally, or even in the organizing spaces, or even with this court case. So many people ask me, well, how did I figure out that I wanted to be a part of this particular court case? Well, it was the same motivation that I had with starting my company. I got tired of being sat, on the sidelines because of the fact that I'm a cis hetero Black man and I'm not supposed to have any opinions besides like sports or like pop culture. It's like, no, actually, I consider myself well read enough. I used to be somewhat of an academic. I still read a bunch every day. And as an American, watching the empire from a different perspective from Japan, it was very disheartening to see the rightward. Um, it's even more of a rightward creep towards fascism and oppressive policies with regards to immigrants and non Japanese looking people. So, for example, with I've sparred with my legal team about this. We call for any others, about, oh, we need body cams. Well, we know what body cams have resulted in America, right? So we need to actually have some more strident demands. Obviously, we have to be realistic in how far we can push people, but like Felicity just said, I've been encouraged by the efficiency and the energy that I found amongst people that felt the same way that I did, even though the circles are not as big as you would see in America. One of the things that I found while I was in those spaces in America is that the bigger the circles are, the bigger the problems are, and those are usually the things like ego clashes, like clout chasing. Those are the things that usually take out the steam from any movement that is, that claims to have the best interests of Black people and oppressed people's uh, interests at heart. Like that, they usually self-destruct because they don't have clarity and real direction. So, in some ways, you could say that the size of many of the circles here in Japan that I've seen, even though they still have their issues, um, we've been able to do a lot with a little in a shorter period of time. So my hope is that with the court case, and we've talked about this privately and publicly, one of the strategies with the legal team is that we get international pressure on the Japanese authorities, because obviously when I had my interactions with the police officers, you could tell. I mean, it was like, okay, do you really want to be out here 2 o'clock in the afternoon questioning me about why I'm here? And then when you see that I am legally here, you still have to spend 15, 20 minutes out of your day, maybe not documenting it, but you still have to appear that you're doing work. It really sucks to have that kind of existential crisis in the middle of what you think is a decent profession, just harassing people for no reason. Um, Obviously, that's going to come from up top, from the central government. and we collectively, one of the biggest challenges that I have, even when publicizing this particular roundtable, there is still, um, as evidenced by the bloodbath that LDP instituted a couple of weeks ago. Because they're even more in control now in the government. I think than ever in the past like 20 years, 30 years. Yeah. There's still an underlying current of apathy that we still have to crack through. There are glimmers of hope, like I said, in the activist circles and some of the other kind of progressive spaces. But when I was talking to my collaborators yesterday about why I keep fighting, why I have hope, is that that's all you got to grab onto is those rays of hope, those glimmers of hope. Because yes, maybe an overwhelming majority of younger people are misinformed or miseducated about Takaichi, but that doesn't preclude you from trying to educate them. So the basis for all of our movements should be the overall liberation of people across the globe. You can't do that without educating people politically. So that means combating miseducation, combating propaganda. Many people are sick and tired of a lot of the stuff that they see on media. Their spans are shot now because of all the technology that we have, the phones and the tablets and the screens. Um, so we have to connect on a more meaningful level in person with people that are like-minded. So that requires work. Many people, again, as a fitness person, I know um, until you make the decision to come to someone like me, you're just spinning your wheels. So you have to make that promise. You have to make that commitment to yourself first. You have to get resolved, basically. That's why I named the company that too. You have to really have a resolution in your mind that you're going to do something. And it starts with your mindset. And once we can do that, then nothing is impossible when it comes to changing our current world and our material conditions. So right now, I'm getting ready to like give my statement again in the district court in 2 weeks. And I'm very hopeful because the momentum has been building up. Um, and one of the hopes that I have is that going back to Mr. Payne, I don't want Japan to look like America. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm from College Park. I'm from Old National. And one thing that I saw when I went back to America in December is how many police officers were just out in the Southern Crescent. If you all know Atlanta, outside of the perimeter, it was ridiculous. So for me, like driving around, one of the reasons why I got stopped by the police so much is because of the fact that I was in places that were not touristy. I'm one black guy just in random place like Inaka in like Asahi Ward of Yokohama going to work, and people curious. So like the police officers are going to check me out. But in Shibuya or like in Shinjuku, it kind of complicates things. You have a million people trying to take selfies in the middle of Shibuya Scramble or like going to Kabukicho or something like that, and you can't stop everybody because you need their money. So things get complicated, but we don't have the militarized police presence in the Kanto area yet. But when I saw in America, just being away for almost a decade, going back to see my family, it was ridiculous. And that has been a phenomenon that's been happening over the past 4 or 5 decades, arguably after we've been. I guess you could make an argument we've been in the middle of a counter revolution for the past like 5 or 6 decades after COINTELPRO like reached its peak. It's still going on in my opinion. But um, my hope is after being in Japan for this amount of time over a period of like pretty much 2 decades, that we don't repeat some of the same things, and hopefully the people that the young people here today, I'm so glad that you're here, that you can take this energy and you can use that to activate and to educate and to mobilize people to not allow the creep rightward to continue in America or wherever you're from. So that's my main hope, and I hope that the people that are paying attention to me and actually listening to my plaintiffs and the people that have supported me up to this time, that they keep fighting, that they stay hopeful, they stay true, and remember why they started paying attention and being aware. And I appreciate all of you because without you, there is nothing. There is no movement without the people. So, big shout out to Duke University. But Duke University, again, it's an institution made of people. So, a special thank you to Kim for reaching out and organizing all this. And then also another shout out to Mr. Classberry in the chat. He's bringing, the media has its role. Obviously, it can be good or bad, but like it's a great tool. And Jonathan has proven to be on the right side of history so far, and I hope that Duke University and everybody else that's in this room can help support him getting this story out and raising awareness and countering some of the narratives that are out there about immigrants. Like Felicity said, it's a great low hanging fruit. Somebody needs to be a scapegoat, but I'm nobody's scapegoat. I'm the main character of my story. And I hope to be here for a long time for my children, and I won't let anybody stop me from just making space for myself. So I thank you all for listening to me and babbling about freedom and liberation. But yes, thank you so much. And feel free to ask me any question. Nothing's off limits.
Great. Thank you so much, Maurice, for those inspiring and powerful words. I really appreciate it. I really especially appreciate you speaking about the importance of liberation and education. I completely agree that those are so important. And to the youth in the crowd, please do take Maurice's words seriously. I know it sounds corny to say you are the future, but you are the future. So so thank you both, Felicity and Maurice, for your remarks and for your expertise. So first, those of you in attendance, please feel free to put in some questions in the chat. We will be opening the floor to Q&A shortly. But before that, I actually wanted to just be in conversation with you both, Felicity and Maurice, and also give you both the opportunity to, think together and potentially ask each other questions. But I'd actually like to start with two questions, if that's okay. So the first question, and Maurice, I was wondering if you could potentially share any updates about the civil lawsuit or the coverage of the lawsuit in Japan. Even just doing like a Google search of your name or the lawsuit, a lot of foreign outlets come up, whereas like the Japanese outlets, we don't see as many results. So I was wondering if you could share any updates or anything about coverage. And even, the potential of digital networks in, being this kind of undercommons and sharing important information that gets lost in the regulated and mainstream media. And the second question, which perhaps both Felicity and Maurice, perhaps both of you can answer, and I'm particularly curious about, maybe you sharing some insight for the folks in the crowd who may not know much about the current landscape and the political landscape in Japan. But I'm curious, how does the current political and social landscape, especially with regards to the LDP and, kind of the rise of the Sanseito, the Japan First Party, and Prime Minister Takaichi's policies, how does that landscape impact police racial profiling and just the fabric of Japanese society, particularly with regards to migrant rights and well-being? So those are two questions that I have, and yeah, I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts and insights.
Dr. Stone-Richards, you have the honors.
Oh, thank you. Um,
I'm going to say something bombastic, so just go ahead. Yeah.
who in terms to landscape? You know, it's tricky because on the one hand, obviously Sanseito is terrible. On the other hand, when you actually look at their policies, apart from a few like wackadoo policies, like they want to, they want to denaturalize people who don't have like, at least a Japanese grandparent. They want to be able to really restrict citizenship. Most of their policies are not actually that different from the LDP right wing anyway. It's not like we're looking at, MAGA Trump going back to the Tea Party that were absolutely obliterating everything that sort of center-right conservatism stood for. You don't really see that in Sanseto. And equally, new parties come up and then burn out very frequently in Japan. Now, this may not be the case with Senseito because we are in a sort of general global right-wing resurgence. But given how, uh, Sanae Takeichi has been able, was able to get her massive majority, in the end, she did not need to, get into coalition with these, little piddly new right-wing parties. So I don't necessarily think that they have the impact that we were fearing so far. I also don't think that despite her really hardline rhetoric, you know, the realities of demography force certain situations. You can scream until you're blue in the face that I want to restrict immigration. We want Japanese for the Japanese, and you have no workers. You have actually had to start this made national news, the first non-Japanese person to start being trained to be a bus driver because you don't have enough people to be bus drivers. You don't have enough people to be nurses. You don't have enough people in constructions. You have no workers. And at a certain point, okay, either you are going to decline as an economic power, which obviously, Takeshi is not trying to be the prime minister that oversaw the collapse of Japan as an economic power, or you are just going to accept immigrants. Now, you can accept immigrants and be really shitty to immigrants, and I think that's probably what's going to happen. And so the, activists and advocates are going to have their work cut out for them. But I do not see them, they're not turning around the demographic clock. She's clearly not, this is not a feminist, so she's not interested in investing in the policies that you need to support working mothers, which is the only way that increase the birth rate. And even if you do increase the birth rate, which is not going to happen because this is part of a global trajectory that all countries' birth rates are declining, babies don't become workers for 20 years. So you still need to plug that gap with immigrant labor. And honestly, most of her economic policies are not vastly different from Abenomics, which did not succeed in jumpstarting the Japanese economy like Prime Minister Abe had hoped. Um, so weirdly, I feel like this is going to be one of those things where, she has her majority, she's going to do what she's going to do, but I don't see her changing a lot of the structural issues that have plagued Japan. Because these are things where the right wing refuses to face the reality that your future is in immigration. And if you don't do this properly, then it's just a bad situation for everyone. So, I'm not I'm not terrified for her in terms of like what this means for Japanese immigrants. What this means for potentially her alliance with Trump and potentially antagonizing China, that's like a whole, that's a different thing. And I think she may, she's clearly held a harder line towards China, wants to, be closer military with Taiwan. That might cause its own problems, but that's not a strictly, immigrant and minority focused issue.
Well said. You're a tough act to follow. Why are you doing this to me, man? No, well, but thank you for your words, Dr. Stone Richards. Is it Stone Richards or Richards? Stone
Stone
Richards.
Richards, yeah.
Sorry. So yeah, and I should have asked you that before because I'm like just Felicity. You make me think of the WB. But I when I first heard of Sanseto, I when I started researching Kamiya, I was like, okay, he's a stooge for the LDP because he used to be LDP. He used to be Jiminto. So I was like, okay, this is classic, wagging the dog, like look over here. They're gonna say something really crazy, like the same with the NHK party. We're saying some really wild stuff while we just keep going with what what's led us to have this iron triangle that's controlled Japan for the past 8 decades. the policies are really like when I look at it, because my Japanese is terrible, but I'm like, wait a minute, huh? Like, wait, they're not really saying that much different, and the material realities have not really changed. It's just that now we can focus our energy on Sanseito and all of this stuff that they're saying. Same with the Conservative Party. We focus on that. I used to live down the street from the Uyoku Dantai. Like there used to be a group of people that had the vans and all that. They're used to direct your attention away. So it's the same with white supremacy. You see the same stuff happening in media in mainstream media in America, where we distract ourselves talking about, oh, like people that can't read past a fifth grade level, not to be, elitist, but you can't read past the fifth grade level, and you deign to criticize someone like a Dr. Derek Bell. Like you don't even know what you're talking about. Critical, you don't know what critical race theory is, and you're like, they're trying to do a CRT and this. No, no, no. You're trying to distract from the fact that you are actually hurting children, or you're taking away money and hoarding it for some other purpose. I think, like I said before, with the police issue, it's a lot of stuff that we have seen before. It just happens in maybe a slower pace, and then it's just a different iteration of the same kind of playbook. Um, as to the court case, um, it's been really interesting because when we first submitted the complaint in January of, is it 2024? Wow, been over 2 years now. I got a flurry of attention, and that was part of the strategy. I got a flurry of foreign media outlet attention, and then it was who Mainichi Shimbun, Asahi reached out, NHK obviously, Kyodo. A couple of them came by my gym, and then privately off the record, a lot of them say, okay, well, this stuff is going to get the kibosh at the editorial desk. Like a lot of people don't want to touch this because of the political climate. So when I call someone like Kamiya Sohei a clown, clowns are dangerous. Like Pennywise will kill you, you know. Um, um, John Wayne Gacy was murdering people. Like he was still a clown though. Like you still have to respect the potentiality of danger and harm that they can do. So I take Sanseito and all those people on the right very seriously in terms of how they can bolster or be a bulwark against any criticism against the LDP, because the LDP, their policies are what has harmed me and people that look like me, my children potentially, where someone can, for example, say, another issue that, I think is related, but like when I bring this up with media outlets, like housing discrimination, like if you just replace the name Japan with the United States of America, you're like, wait a minute, that's Jim Crow. That's, this is the nadir of black existence in 1890s, when you say, well, as soon as I see your black face, you can't stay here. You can't eat here. You can't drink here. It's like, yeah, like, but it's Japan. It's their culture. It's like, no, well, we have to address, sometimes if we essentialize like, oh, I love Japan and I'm a weeb and everything about Japan is perfect. Um, we miss the forest for the trees. So a lot of the things that we're talking about now, they're all wrapped up in otherizing people. And I dealt with this in dealing with the media. Like no shots at Jonathan in the crowd, either of the Johns. When people want to cover me or try to like figure out what I'm thinking, and they write about me or they write my words, I still have a healthy skepticism. I still have a healthy like suspicion. Shout out to Walter Rodney. Like any intellectual, any person that claims to speak for you, you still gotta you can trust a little bit, but you have to verify, because some of the media outlets that reached out to me, they left out so much of my words. One of my first interactions with the Associated Press, they did not run all the stuff that I said, and I was mentioning Paul Robeson is like one of my North Stars. I mentioned like George Jackson, all of these, kind of black radicals, and like what motivates me to actually fight. And they're like, no, like he's just mad about racism. I'm like, wait, what? Like I didn't say that. I'm like, oh, now this thing is happening to me. So like a lot of people lose a lot of the nuance of why me and the two other plaintiffs actually stepped up. And then all another thing, a lot of the context that gets left out too is that how many people were not named to be or did not step up to become plaintiffs. There were so many people, and some of them are watching when they're not in the room now, but they're watching. They've seen on social media, they're like monitoring this, and they're like, yeah, they passed me along the Tokyo Bar Association survey. And they were like, yeah, this is something that you could do, but I have a story too, but I can't risk anything. So it's the culture of belonging and wanting to fit in, to the point where you accept a certain amount of abuse as an immigrant. That is prevalent in all of the coverage, I think, of this case, because one of the main narratives is that, when people attack me, I got all types of hate mail and weird messages in my inbox and on my social media. Yeah, if you don't like it, why don't you just get out? Why don't you just go back to Africa? I'm like, yeah, it's not a new one. It's an oldie but goodie. But um, I'm hearing that from non-Japanese people and Japanese people. So it's very interesting to see how it is playing out, because my lawyers told us it was going to be a long haul. Like there was no illusion on my end that this case would be resolved quickly. Like they said, even up to 5 years. So we're in year two. We're going into year three now. And I kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel, but with this recent election, it's like, oh, like people are really doubling down. And then, like Felicity just said, for me, um, baby, I love to fight. When I know I'm right, I like the fight. I love the fight because we talk about the fight in history. I want to be documented, knowing that I actually tried to struggle for righteousness. Um, if you say we don't, they say, oh, we don't want foreigners either. The Conservative Party, their slogan is like, we don't need foreigners. It's like, okay, please institute the exodus of like 10 15 million essential workers. Please do that, and let's see. If you really want to cut off your nose to spite your face, I like to see you try. But then, like you just said, political pragmatism will always prevail. Like Takaichi, you can say anything. You can say a whole bunch of negative things about her, but what you cannot say is that she's not savvy and that she doesn't know how to survive. She's lasted this long in this climate as a woman, especially as one of the pickums. Choose me. So it's like, yeah, she's gonna figure out how to use maybe the right wingers to hide the fact that, yeah, no, actually we do need you all. And we'll figure out a compromise one way or another, but we're gonna keep it quiet, release it on a Sunday afternoon. So yeah. Yeah. Oh, the doctors have questions. I'll stop talking. I hope that answers some of your question, Kim.
Yes, it definitely does. And I see some questions in the chat. But in the meantime, Felicity, did you have any responses to what was just said or
This is one of the things that I've thought about a lot is, because it really, when you're saying like the AP press that they had sort of cut out a lot of what, you know, how you were speaking to other Black radicals and placing yourself in that political tradition, and that even when you have somewhat sympathetic media that is reporting on a thing, they always want to cut out any reference to Black radical politics or the history of Black radical movements. They want this to be a sort of, oh, here's a story time about how I'm so sad that, they discriminated against me and all of this. What they don't want to hear is that you are a seasoned thinker. They don't want to hear that you are aware of your history, that you're aware of the history of political movements, and they definitely don't want you to place yourself as now, and I am, the next generation of this political movement as it exists in Japan. And this is something that is, I see repeatedly in terms of really trying to undermine just sort of the Black intellectual tradition, and also just like Black activism broadly, that you can contain it to this one thing, and which undermines the fact that these are all connected fights, and that you are aware that these are connected fights, you are aware of the history that you're a part of, and this could have been a really extraordinary moment where you're talking about the people that have informed your practice. And then people reading the Associated Press article could have been like, oh, I've never heard of Paul Robeson. Who's that? And then you look into Paul Robeson. Um, and it is a thing that I've seen frequently, and it's always sad when I see it. And it was, sad to hear it again. Because again, all I knew of, Maurice Shelton was what I had read in the newspapers, and all I had read was, yes, this is one of the co-defendants, and talking about how he has been harassed and yada yada yada. And I would have actually been delighted to hear that, oh my God, this person is sort of again, yes, you're tired of being tired, but also this is a person who has, to the point of your company name, this is a person who has resolve. This is a person who is aware of the impact, the potential long-term impact of this lawsuit. Like, this is not just a person who was like, oh, I'm just getting annoyed with the police right now. Like, this is a person who's thinking beyond himself. And yeah, it's a shame that that doesn't come through in the news.
It's a shame, but you know what? Wasn't a surprise. Actually, and to bring up current events right now, like I said, there's an ongoing dialogue between me and one of the lead lawyers about like my statement that I'm going to give to the court on March 12th. And they're like, "Hey, don't say the word fascism." I'm like, "Wait, what? Why can't I say that word? The F word? You mean like the F word or the F word?" It's like, no, because they're gonna focus on that word, and it's going to divert all the attention to all the meaningful words that you have about why you decided to fight. I'm like, oh my gosh. But this person is on my side, so it's like one of the things I tell my clients all the time, especially in the organizing circles too, you have to be pragmatic. People like Kwame Ture, Fred Hampton. Kwame Ture is a great example. I only look at electoral politics as a way to organize my people. So like I have all the smoke for Democrats. I am not I used to work for the Democratic National or where I work for the Georgia branch of the DNC, and I have all the smoke for them. But if I know I have to be in I have to have some type of collegial relationship with them, then how do I strategize that without getting all the ick on me? I still have to work with these people. I still have to, get along with some of these people, which is like a really crappy contradiction that everybody has to deal with. But still, same with the BLM movement in Japan. One of the things, and I could just say this is anecdotal. Um, you all can Google this person's name. His name is Javier Ambler. He's my cousin. He died in Richardson County, Texas, several years ago as a result of police actions trying to record an episode of Live PD. Um, I had a sign saying, justice for Javier Ambler at the protests at Yo Yogi Park, and I had someone like checking my sign, like, "Yo, we have to approve the sign." I'm like, what the, I'm about to curse, but I'm like, "Yo, like, why would you need to approve a sign that is not even a call to action? It's really like, okay, well, we need justice, but how? Okay, but I just want you to know his name." And like I had issues with that, but then I'm like, okay, mature Maurice has to say, you know what? No, I have to build with these people, even though this younger white gentleman is telling me, well, I have to approve your sign to talk about this black man that got killed, Afro Latino man that got killed in Texas by by a law enforcement agency in America. I have to approve it in Japan to talk about it. I'm like, I still have to. I have to exist in this circle. So it's very important that we find, those common bonds and make sure that we don't blow each other up, because a lot of times there's a lot of backbiting on the left, and it's a struggle every day for me not to do that, to alienate people that I know can help me. So yeah.
Thank you both so much for your remarks, and I'm really grateful for this conversation. And especially as both of you mentioned, there is so much erasure and censorship that goes on, especially with talking about the Black radical tradition and activism. So I'm glad that we have this space. And Maurice, I'm so sorry about the censorship that happened in the your interviews. Please use this space to say anything and everything that you weren't able to say or that got erased in the publication process. But in the meantime, I wanted to bring everyone's attention to these wonderful questions in the chat. So, just starting with Mark's question. So, I've heard people say that Japan is safe, even in police encounters, the police will bow to you. What would you say to folks who think that being profiled in Japan isn't so bad, at least they won't get hurt? That's an interesting question because, especially, I'm from New York and knowing what the NYPD is like. That's a very interesting question, and one that's also addressed in the NPR documentary, Living While Black in Japan. Kind of what it's like to go from, police racial profiling the US versus like going to Japan. And, it's still bad. But like there's like the folks who participate in the documentary, they were saying like, well, at least, we're not in fear of getting murdered or shot, right? But at the end of the day, still, profiling, it's still bad. So,
Mm.
yeah, so let's start with that question. Then John Russell ha also has questions for both of you. So, we'll just maybe start with Mark's question.
Dr. Villegas, go ahead, Dr. Stone-Richards. I'm laughing because it's Mark, but yeah.
So, it's so funny because when I first started looking into BLM in Japan, and one of my professors had a similar question because I was also looking at, the immigration detention centers and undocumented immigrants who are basically imprisoned in these detention centers, and there's like a few thousand in the country. And she was saying, but like when you compare that to like ICE detention centers that have like hundreds of thousands of people, is this like really, something that's that bad? And my position is either you care about human rights and dignity or you don't. Unfortunately, when it comes to human rights abuses, the bar is in hell. And if we use America as the bar that we all compare ourselves to, then we're all doing great. And Europe loves doing this. Oh, they love American racist violence because then they can say, "Look, we're not that racist. We're not murdering people in the street. What's this? What's the problem?" Um, and it's just a way of always, distracting from the fact that do you treat your own people like this? No? Then you know that you should not be treating people like this. And there is also the idea that we are not trying to just be better than the worst. We believe that there is a minimum bar that we have to reach to respect human dignity, to respect human rights. And thank God Japan isn't as murderous. We don't want to make the claim that they are as murderous. We don't wish that they were more murderous so that we would have, more galvanizing examples. But this is wrong. This is wrong, and also this is illegal. So whether or not you think police harassment, harms as many people on a day-to-day basis as, police who actively kill people in other countries, it doesn't change the fact that you have police who feel perfectly comfortable regularly breaking the law. And that is a problem in any political context, and is a problem in this one as well. And my position is you don't you don't get to mistreat people. And we're in the Japanese context, we're not in the American context, and so we're going to use Japan's standards for what that treatment should look like.
I agree. Yeah, so somebody asked me this several times. That's why I'm laughing because I think me and Dr. Villegas actually discussed this privately. For me, having guns pointed at me, getting abused by the cops in America, and then having a family. I got someone that got out of prison. They got freed by the efforts of the Innocence Project in Ohio, actually. So it's someone that's very similar to Chris Payne's situation, where he got convicted of a crime he did not commit. Was in prison for 8 years, and hopefully, knock on wood, that doesn't happen to Chris Payne. But I'm like, yeah, we should not be, and that's where we fall into the trap of always comparing ourselves to the preeminent, superpower, that is it has built its empire off of abuse and exploitation of people that look like me and every many other people in this room. If we always try to hold ourselves up to that standard, then we're just spinning our wheels, and it's really not that much of a comparison. Like, of course, yeah, I don't have to worry like as much about a Japanese police officer shooting me while I'm handcuffed, and then making it seem like it's my fault, like we're seeing in America. But it doesn't mean that the abuse is not happening. So it's something that we really shouldn't focus on too much. We should really be focused on the fact, how do we stop that rightward shift towards the fact that, yeah, eventually we're going to be making excuses for why. I thought he was going for the gun. I was in fear for my life, even though we wrapped him in the green sheet and made him a burrito. I was still afraid of the green burrito. Oh my God, we had to, pump him full of lead. No, I don't want that to even be feasible in anybody's mind. So, like, to answer somebody's question, Mr. Watson, I was going to say, yeah, uh, how much of the black liberation, or how much of black liberation strategy should be considered in Japan? All of it, especially the part that COINTELPRO attacked the most. In terms of, I know some people out on the streets, they're giving food out to people. They take donations. They're providing like material goods and services to people that need it. Um, what you see in the manosphere and all these other right wing kind of spaces tucked away on some algorithm on YouTube or wherever. A lot of people that are disaffected, and they don't have the language to explain why they're being disaffected and why they're being marginalized. It's because of a lot of these policies. So you have to reach out to those people. A lot of times people are just hungry. They're hangry. They don't have work. So that's what you're seeing right now. Um, and also, I think because of the fact that Japan, and this is another phrase that I use that the lawyer said I shouldn't use. So Japan is a little brother of American empire, American hegemony. Yeah. Um, if we recognize that, Hakeem is saying, yeah, like the development of racial hegemony in Japan considered to have the same trajectory as Euro Anglo West. So yeah, well, of course, like Japan is a G7 country. They're in tacit agreement with they're in lockstep with pretty much all of the major U.S. foreign policy out there. We abide by killing babies in Gaza, per governmental policy. So yeah, so like if they do one thing this way, they're going to do the other thing the other way. So if we see that happening in kind of slow or slower motion, I wouldn't say it's slow motion, then let's take from those lessons of people like, the Black Panthers, or like the African Brotherhood, any of the movements, notable people, or even the unsung people that are in the background. Because I think the power, especially for me, like if you look at my social media, got like 40,000 followers, maybe like 500 of them are real people that really follow me and actually support me. Like those people that you don't even know the names of, that's where your power is going to come from. It's not going to be the people that are stepping out in front like me that are actually going to change anything. Ultimately, it's going to be a collective action of all of those people that are just nameless, anonymous people out there just trying to live their lives. You got to make that small choice right now to actually say, you know what? Do we want Japan or any other country that claims to be economically developed to take the same trajectory as the Euro Anglo West? I would say hell no. Like I would hope not, because you see what's going on in Europe, you see what's going on in America, and is it, like all the sci-fi and anime that you see, like post-apocalyptic, like, oh, like I'm walking through the desert, there's no water, right? We're talking about it now, like all these data farms taking up all the water. How much conviction of the heart do you have to say, you know what? Maybe I do want water for my children. Um, and for me, like I said before, the activities that I engage in with Resolve is like with fitness, we have a low pressure situation where we can connect with people on a human level, on a real level, so we can actually change our minds and our hearts to actually say, you know what, okay, this person standing across from me or sitting next to me is a person that has the same hopes and dreams. It just looks a little different, and if I can recognize that common humanity, then I can work towards a better future. Like if you're just some sock puppet account with some anime profile picture and you're calling me a monkey or something like that, yeah, it's easy for me to write you off as not a human. It's easy for me to not care about the fact that you're suffering and that you're in pain. But when I know that I'm engaged in something productive like, physical fitness, holistic wellness, um, burnout prevention, all these things, abuse prevention, all of this stuff, um, because I'm an anti-bully. Like, yeah, that's where it starts. We have to start from somewhere. So that's what I try to do. I hope that answered your question.
And actually, I'd like to add one more thing that even if the police aren't killing people, they're doing a lot of corrupt things also to Japanese people. Because the Japanese police are allowed to arrest you and detain you for more than 3 weeks without charge. And this is something that they have used effectively against a lot of leftist activists, especially during the anti-G8 protests. And actually, they would keep people for longer because what they would do is that they would release you and then rearrest you again with no charge. And they kept one activist for up to 3 months without charge. It's a situation where one of the immigrant rights sort of youth unions that I was working with were helping a man of African heritage who had been attacked at his work site. He was the only non-Japanese person at his work site. He got into a dispute with a Japanese man, and this man took a hammer to his head. And the only reason he's not dead is because he was, wearing the safety equipment. And, even though obviously he has c clear injuries, he went to the hospital, the worksite was like, no, he just fell backwards on a thing that stabbed him. And of course, who are the police going to believe? This random African person or the company who also curiously didn't have their, security camera footage working right at that time. It's the type of thing where if the police are regularly harassing non-Japanese people, even if they themselves are not hurting these people, you are signaling to everybody in Japan that these people don't matter. And there are a lot of people in Japan who do hurt non-Japanese people repeatedly, especially in a worksite context where you have, a horrific injuries happening in, small, what are called black companies, these small and medium-sized companies that have absolutely no oversight. There's no healthcare protections, no worker protections, and the police are useless. And everybody knows that the police aren't going to do anything. So this is the type of thing also that for as long as the immigrant community cannot rely on the police in terms of enforcing their rights and the law, that means they are vulnerable to every random Japanese creep that wants to hurt them. So even though the profiling itself you might not think is that important, what that signals to Japanese society in terms of police treatment towards immigrants matters a great deal.
Thank you both
Yeah,
so
23
much.
days is crucial.
Yeah.
Tough.
Yeah, and this is all such important context, and thank you both for bringing our attention to that, especially for those who may not be super acquainted with the police system in Japan and all the issues. So thank you so much. I'm keeping an eye on time, so it's since technically the event officially ends at 8:30, so we still have time for a few more questions. I want to um, bring our attention to two questions from John Russell, who, for those of you who may not know the audience, Dr. John Russell is one of the leading and pioneer scholars of Afro-Japanese encounters. So I definitely am in fangirling right now, but so the two questions that Dr. Russell asked. So for Dr. Stone-Richards, could you describe some of the coalitions that have formed and how sustainable they are? In the 1990s, JAFA formed coalitions with feminist, resident Korean, and Burakumin groups, but unfortunately they collapsed. What are the prospects for BLM? And then for Maurice, could you discuss Chris Payne's situation and what kind of activities Resolve engaged in? Thank you both.
I'll be quick. So coalitions form and collapse all the time. The Stop Army RP movement is a coalitional movement, which just off the top of my head, I know there's Japan for Black Lives, Kurdish right groups, African migrant right groups, Human Rights Osaka, and a number of other social support organizations. It has the support of the Tokyo Bar Association and Call for. So this is already a coalitional movement. It'll last as long as it can last. I think to Maurice's point, he's trying to avoid getting into the leftist squabbles. And I think you raised a good point that the fact that the volunteers really involved in most of the work are relatively small in number actually helps to minimize a lot of the fights that you would have with the larger coalition. And I think the understanding that you actually don't have that many people means you're going to step more carefully because you don't have people to lose. And I think it helps also that the demands that they're making are necessary forms. They're not super radical, as Maurice mentioned. I think they can go further and they should. But for as long as they're relatively moderate reforms, like none of the groups involved here are going to have any issues with those reforms. So I don't see this coalition falling apart anytime soon.
Yeah, I think I answered part of that question too about what Resolve is involved in. But yeah, like I said, I can say this: it's a safe space. Usually for me, when I enter those spaces, I try to put people on notice early on. Like I'm anti-bully, so if I sniff that out, and that's my own ego, it's a kind of a contradiction. For example, like I think Felicity, you've studied a couple of these groups because like we have someone in common, Malika. Like I had talked to her about dealing with these people saying, okay, well you haven't read enough theory, so you get shut down. It's like, okay, well for me, guess what? If you do that to me and I or anybody else in the circle, like I'm checking you. So I think to answer another question too, it's like um, what sustained dialogue means for me is that it's always buoyed by mutual respect for the other person's lived experience, and also whatever study. You don't have to have any letters behind your name or have some prestigious institution behind you. um, I just know if you have the right mindset and you have the energy to be in that space in the first place, I give you that respect. I hear you out. Same for dignity. For me as someone who's been in the spotlight for a little bit, and I'm not famous by any means, but some people think, oh, like you're kind of famous. Like I have to avoid being tokenized because tokens get spent. Um, love A lot of people love to focus on a leader type. I don't want to be a quote unquote leader. I am a leader, but I don't want to be a leader that's that people can focus on. Like one of my criticisms of BLM was like people like a D-Ray, they can pop out of nowhere, and then we focus on the blue vest, and we don't talk about the fact that like there are so many people on the ground already doing the work without any praise or plaudits or any type of material benefit except for the satisfaction that they're trying to fight for a better future. So I think if we can try to do that, especially with black people in Japan, because we everywhere, like no matter what you want to say about black folks, we are everywhere and we gonna be there. And you need to be okay with that because like we make everything better. Just that's for anybody that wants to see this recording. They're like the 13%, 50% 50% of crime, that's for them. I think a lot of people, if we are aware, you have to wrap that with a obligation or responsibility to move, to act. That's the main thing that I always tell the younger people. That's to Binlin Sun. So make sure that we don't essentialize, like for example, any other culture, over another. Like we all have, a story, and they're all valid. So yeah.
Thank you so much. And let's see. Any other last questions? I see that Maurice, you kindly answered some folks'
Yeah,
questions also in text form.
I'm an
Um,
MC. That's what I do. I chop it up. Like, hey, we gotta wrap it up.
yeah,
Oh,
I guess. Oh, sorry, what were you going to say?
Mr. Clasberry, he has to shout out the documentary. I'm putting him on spot.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
no,
he unmuted.
is he? Oh, I don't know
Yeah,
if
he
he's.
unmuted. Go ahead.
Let me see. I could unmute him if he's. Oh yeah, there you go. Hello, Mr. Classberry. Oh,
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we
yes.
can hear you.
Well, first, I just want to say I'm so glad to be here and to kind of hear this conversation. I'm a filmmaker. I'm actually in Durham, but I'm originally from Texas, and I heard about Maurice's story in 2024 when it first got announced. And he and I have been working on a documentary kind of covering what he's doing, but very much that touches on a lot of what we're talking about here. That this is a story about racial profiling in Japan, but it has so many connections to just the way that we see and police Black people in the world, right? And I did want to mention just because there was we've talked about Chris Payne's case. I'm covering some of Chris Payne's story as well as best I can, but kind of what has happened for me is, and this goes back to this idea of, there's not the risk of being murdered by police in Japan, right? But someone like Chris, he's in the situation he is because of his interaction with police. He was, if you don't know the story, he's currently in a detention center in Japan and was convicted of a sexual assault. The reason why he was convicted is largely centered around the analysis of DNA evidence that he voluntarily gave when he was arrested for breaking and entering. Basically, he fell asleep in a private residence, after passing out being drunk. Just kind of it happens a lot in Japan, actually. Um, and so there is this idea of you might not have the immediate violence, but there is this kind of, as a Black person, as a brown person, as someone who's been otherized, you open up yourself to this potential threat of the state in a way that you know is kind of is alarming for me. It sort of opened my eyes, and I've been really appreciative of Maurice opening his story and meeting with me. I don't have anything to say about the film as far as you can see it here because it's still very much a work in progress. But if anyone wants to learn more, we can kind of arrange that. I hope to have something together. I don't know, in a few months. I'm actually reaching out to Maurice's family. I'm kind of like trying to do more of a profile on him. And I'm Dr. Russell, you're someone that I do want to talk to as well. Maurice has spoken about you quite a bit, and I've read some of your work, and you as well, Dr. Stone-Richards. So I will likely be in touch. And Dr. Hassel, I'm glad to be connected with you.
Great. I'm very excited to hear about the documentary. Also very excited about your work with the 1619 project as well. So we at APSI and at Duke would love to screen the documentary when it's complete, and I hope we get a chance to also meet in person, especially since you're based in Durham. Oh yes, Alex Nickley said let's screen the film at Duke when it's ready. So you have Duke support, and so I realize it's 8:30. Thank you all so much for being in conversation. And for those in the audience, I was wondering, Maurice, Dr. Stone-Richards, and Mr. Clasberry, if folks want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do it?
Through my UMish email. So I can drop that here. But I did want to, if we could just go a few minutes over, because there was one question that I really wanted to get into, like how, to what extent, like Japan has been, using political movements from other countries, in particular the United States. Like, yes, it does has its own history of homegrown political movements. But I also wanted people to understand, like, for all like Japanese political actors, they have never concerned themselves solely with Japanese intellectual production. They have always looked at multiple different sources, and for the leftists especially, when dealing with the question of racism, they knew that the people who actually had the most sophisticated takes on this were, the Black Americans that they were then increasingly in contact with in the post-war period. So they have been drawing on the Black radical tradition for quite some time, and the minority groups within Japan as well have been doing this because it's all about when we're fighting systems like this, it's all about crowdsourcing as much information as possible. And if you're in a context where your average Japanese person doesn't want to acknowledge any kind of discrimination against the Burakumin, the Zainichi Koreans, the Ainu, the Okinawans, all of the new immigrants, your own history of anti-racist intellectual thought is more or less limited to the ethnic minorities themselves, but not really coming from the Japanese people. And so you're also looking to a different context, which is where, the context that Japan got anti-Blackness from. They got it from the Europeans and the Americans. So it stands to reason that you're also going to look to those contexts for the solution to fighting anti-Black violence.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Excellently said. And
Talking
yes,
about Stone-Richards.
yeah,
Come on. Shout
yeah.
out to Black Americans.
Yes, there's this long history of Afro-Asian solidarity, especially in, like with Black radical activists and scholars also think about, W.E.B. Du Bois and his work, and also just even like thinking of Afro-Asian solidarity in the context of the United States, like think of Malcolm X and Yuri Kochiyama. Like there's just this long history of Afro-Asian solidarity, which is why I get confused when some scholars in Japanese studies, they in response to my work or like other like folks in response to other folks doing Afro-Japanese studies, there's this question like, well, oh, why are you applying Black feminist frameworks to Japan? It's like, what? Why
Because the feminists apply Black feminist frameworks to Japan.
Don't like Black people. Who said that?
Oh,
Who said that?
oh.
Yeah.
Uh, like yeah, so like I feel like this conversation overall just like really highlights the importance of Afro-Asian solidarity and also just the continued importance for activism, fighting the good fight, and resolve as well to do in line with Maurice, the title of your business. Um, but yeah, thank you all so much for attending, and especially in the evening if you're in the United States, afternoon wherever you are, and also morning in Japan. Please stay in touch with all of us and look forward to documentary. And thank you, Maurice and Felicity, so much for joining us, for sharing your expertise. I greatly appreciate all the work that you do, and looking forward to more stories of triumph and also just being in solidarity. So thank you both so much. And yes, thank you for
Thank you so
joining us.
much for inviting us. This was a wonderful roundtable.
Yes.
Thank you so
My
much.
heart is full now. You got a battery in my back now. I can face the day right now because of this. So thank you all.
Yeah, so much needed conversation. Lord knows times are rough, so so thank you so much for this space and being in community. Um, all
Thank you.
right, all right. Well, thank you all so much. Good night, good day, wherever you are.
All right. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
of
Bye, everyone.
course. Bye.